half on your seminar at the Department of Political and Social Change. This is one of these days where we have a presentation by one of our PhD students to present their research. It's not particularly popular with our students, but with our audience, as you see, it is a quite significant event, and it attracts a significant crowd as well. Today we hear from Bayu Dadias Konyadi. He is a PhD candidate here at the department, started in December last year. He is also a lecturer at Gajah Mada University. So as you see at his PowerPoint here, the topic of his presentation, and indeed the topic of his PhD thesis, is the politics of aristocracy in post-authoritarian Indonesia. We have 45 minutes for his presentation, and then as usual questions and answers. Please, Bayu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Thank you everybody for coming to my presentation. Today I would like to present my thesis proposals. Here is the three sultans in Indonesia. The left one is the claimers of the Sultanate of Palembang in South Sumatra. The middle one is Sultan of Yogyakarta, and the left one is Sultans of Ternate in North Maluku. Before we continue my presentation, let me start first of all with the definitions. Many writers who wrote about aristocracy define aristocracy as hereditary ruling groups, or like Leven in 1994 define aristocracy as an historical hereditary ruling groups. However, in this research, I define aristocracy as descendant of the kings, sultans, and their immediate family at vertical and horizontal lines that were controlling particular area during the colonial period. So in my proposal, I also wrote that all of those descendants should be from the legitimate source, not from concubines. There is a special characteristic of Indonesian aristocracy for you to notice that Indonesian aristocracy is highly localized and fragmented. So you cannot find like nationwide monarchies of Western Europe or Southeast Asia like in Thailand or Cambodia. The second one is that aristocracy in Indonesia has a low level of institutionalization, except from maybe Yogyakarta after it gets significant institutionalization since 2012. At the top, this is my outline. So I would like to show you the rising participation of aristocracy in Indonesian politics in 1998. The first one is at the province level, and then the second one's at the regional level. The first one, at the province level, Yogyakarta aristocracy has guaranteed the right the position of governor and vice governor. So in Yogyakarta, there will be no local direct election like any other provinces in Indonesia. The sultans also influential in all 5 districts under the province of Yogyakarta. Everybody who supported by sultan will eventually win. In South Sulawesi, in 2007, 12 out of its 24 district heads are aristocrat. 9 out of its 24 district head aristocrat in 2012. The number is slightly reduced, but almost half of those who participate in Pilkada are aristocrat. In Bali, they are not quite well. Only one in Senate who elected, but almost half participants are coming from the aristocratic background. Here is the numbers of aristocracy in DPRD Bali, or in Bali local legislative. We can see that the green one is the commoner. So Bali is very easy. If you see the list, you can easily categorize them based on their background. So the left one, the green one, is the commoners. The number is slightly increased up to 46 before it's reduced to 37. Aristocrat in DPRD shows the declining trend, but overall it's still important in Bali politics. Contrast to the commoners, which slowly reduce their number. In district, in Gianyar for instance, which I can explain later in the case study, the region always been drawn from one of the puris. So it's only consultation between Puri Gianyar and Puri Ubud. In Wajo, in South Sulawesi, aristocracy controls 10 out of its 24 sub-district head, 59 out of its 179 village head, almost half of the local MPs, and according to Bakti, 90% of top position in bureaucracy are coming from aristocrat. In Ternate, Queen Boki failed in Pilkada to compete in the mayoral Ternate in 2005. The rising participation of aristocracy also can be seen what we call as National Kraton Festival held bi-yearly since 1995. So the first one, FKN held in Yogyakarta with, this is the numbers of participants. So only 20 royal houses participated. The second one, held in Cirebon in 1997, 23 royal houses participated. However, due to the economic crisis, they canceled in 1999, and then they held again the third one in Tenggarong with 41 local houses participated. The fourth, held again in Yogyakarta with 32 local aristocracy participated. The fifth, in Surakarta with 32. And then the sixth, held in Goa in 2008 with 42 royal houses participated. The number increased quite significantly with the seven FKN in Palembang in 2010 with 155 royal houses and Adat leader participated. So the other leader become the participant of the festival. The last one held last year in Bau with 115 royal houses participated. So you can see that from the place that the FKN is held, it's a nationwide political gathering in Indonesia. There are many research on this. I will put and choose some of them. Burhan Magenda in 1989 argued that there is a described the declining power of aristocracy during the New Order in 1980s. His thesis is on Kutai aristocracy, in South Sulawesi aristocracy, and in Lombok aristocracy, but only one chapter became a book, The Decline of Aristocracy in East Kalimantan. Mekre and Putra argued that there is a historical dominance of social structures in Bali. Priyambudi, who wrote about the Pilkada, this is the Sultan of Yogyakarta brother, who failed to compete with the incumbent Idam Samawi in 2005, with only received quite low, only 21%. Idam Samawi got 73%. Smith write about the fail of Queen Boki in Ternate to face for the mayoral. However, if we can only see, even though in 2005, Yudoningrat failed to compete with the incumbent, if we see the deeper look, we can see that actually Sultan is not supporting his half-brother. Sultan is supporting the incumbent at that time. So it's actually not declining like what Priyambudi argued, but in my opinion, it's still important, the role of the sultans in local election in Yogyakarta. However, up to now, there is no comprehensive nationwide research on Indonesia's aristocracy has been done after 1998. So they only have one or two cases, but I hope that my research will be the first one who can picture the nationwide aristocratic participation in politics after 1998. It's come to my research question. My main question is, why have Indonesian aristocrats succeed in some areas and failed and not in the others? So basically, I want to know the factors that contribute to the failure on the successful of aristocracy participation in politics after 1998. My supporting question is, what explains the difference in aristocratic influence in various Indonesian provinces and districts? Are there any specific factors that lead to successful aristocratic influence in some regions and prevent their re-emergence in others? So this is basically what I want to see. My reading so far shows that there are at least 5 approaches that I can draw for other writers already written about these topics. The first one is historical, and the second one is institutional. The third one is structural, and the fourth one is the cultural. We start with the first one, the historical or historicist approach. I separated into three main ideas. The first one is historical dominant. Nordock and Klinken, for instance, in 2007, argued that colonial period is the key to understand the current local elite dynamic in Indonesia. So if we want to see what's happened in the local area, we should see what is the condition at the colonial period. The second one, Rome argued that the successful aristocrats actually they never left politics. They're there, but they are not coming to the surface. So he argued that the successful aristocracy is the one who never left politics at all, stay in the politics but not become the top positions. Macri and Putra argued that the successful aristocracy, because of its historical dominance in particular area, which is shown by the continuing livery in Gianyar. The second one here I put in red. Of course, they are not writing about the performance of aristocratic in post-authoritarian Indonesia, but their thinking might be helpful to explain what the phenomenon that I want to answer. Lei, Rum, and Selo Sumajan, for instance, argued that the successful aristocracy in Yogyakarta to gain political position is mainly because they are rewarded during the 1945-1949 revolution. So they take side to the Republican rather than supporting the Dutch. Langenberg argued that the failed aristocracy in East Sumatra is merely because they have very few sympathy with the Republic movement at that time during the revolutions. The Republican portray the aristocracy as the colonial lackeys. Other aristocrats, like Klinken, also argued that other aristocrats failed to follow the footsteps of Yogyakarta because they are taking the Dutch because they get the concession from the Dutch and they are not supporting the Republic. That's why they fail. Harvey is very interesting that he wrote about the South Sulawesi aristocracy who then choose to become the puppet after failed. So in his writing about patriot and puppet, the aristocracy first choose to become the patriot against with the Dutch, but after receive no support from their counterpart in Java, they then choose to become the puppet because they don't have soldiers, they don't have the weapons. The third one, history as the political tools. These two writers, Mujanto in Yogyakarta and Vocer in Riau, argue that history is used by local aristocracy to gain their position in the politics. They use history as their political tool. The second one is institutionalist approach. I divided into three. There are three important institutional changes that might explain the successful or failure of the aristocratic participation in politics. The first one is decentralization. Pratekno argued that decentralization provides a space for aristocrats to engage in politics and is cleverly used by aristocrats to gain position in the politics. Bhakti and Vocer argued that decentralization has strengthened local identities, and it's then transformed. The aristocrat cleverly used these sentiments of identities to transfer into political support. Vipayana, his research in Surakarta and Denpasar, found that decentralization has made the aristocracy similar. They use the aristocracy in Surakarta and Denpasar use similar strategy to return to the politic benefit from the decentralization. The second institutional arrangement that might helpful to explain my phenomenon is the administrative subdivision or pemekaran. So from one district divided into two. Administrative subdivision not always receives support from the traditional aristocrat. Karim, in his research in the Sultanate of Tidore, shown that Sultanate Tidore opposed the idea of the subdivision of the Sofifi district because it will reduce their traditional authorities. the Sultanate traditional authorities. Faucher and Smith also argued that because of administrative subdivision create the new political position, it stimulates the participation or the competition among aristocrats. The third one is local direct elections. There is no doubt that almost all writers who write about political aristocracy use Pilkada as the venue of aristocratic competitions. So it's become important to maybe that these institutional changes used by aristocrats to go to the politics. The third one, structuralist approach. Aristocrats have maintained or regained control over economic resources. Charas founds that in Riau and in Kutai, the aristocrat actively try to get the new opportunity in the economic position which is will be the local will be have after decentralization. So even before decentralization actually implemented in 2001, the aristocracy tried to capture these economic opportunities. One of the strongest argument about the structuralist approach is that found by Hadis and Robinson in 2004. They divided the claims that aristocracy are part of the new order oligarchy, which emerged and expanded from process of capital accumulation. They divided into two periods from 1965 to 1982 and then 1982 to 1997. So during this, the first period is the formation, and the second one is the strengthening process, because they accumulated, because part of the oligarchy which accumulate significant economic resources, they then use it to participate in post-war to Indonesia and successful in gaining political position. Faucher and Nordok also wrote about what happened with the aristocracy during the New Order. They argued that almost all of aristocracy in Indonesia are benefiting during the Dutch. The Habodin argued that the successful aristocracy in Jeneponto is because of its cleverly used their economic sources to compete for the election. The second structuralist approach is that, like Makre and Putra found in Bali, that it's the status of aristocracy is embedded in social and religions. That's why it's very easy to use this sentiment to transfer it into political support. The fourth one, which I cannot neglect, is the cultural mysticism approach, which might explain why some aristocracies successful and why some aristocracies fail. The first one, this is the Ben Anderson concept idea of power, which contradict with the Western idea of power. In Java, power is believed to be concrete, homogeneous, coming from the similar source from the universe, and not asking for legitimacy, which is very contradict to the West idea of abstract and from many sources. So the second one is about the mysticism. Carey is writing about the Java War in 1825. Salahuddin is about Kartosuwiryo descent in early period of Sukarno, and Brocher about the Sawito. All of these writers argued that mysticism is an important part for gaining political support, even it's a descent. Like Brocher about the Sawito movement in 1970s, which can gather important political support, including Muhammad Hatta, Hamka, and TB Simatupang. The second one is about the myth. All of those area who, since that aristocracy is very strong, believe about the myth that the ruler is a divine ruler, is chosen among the people and become the representation of the god in the earth. So that's found, the idea can be found like in Jogja, in Ternate, which is the descendants of the man married to the angel, and then all of these descendants become the king of Bacan. Ternate, Tidore, and Jailolo. It's also, the stories also can be found in South Sulawesi of Tumanurung. Rome and Arya Bima believe that many important political decisions in Indonesia is actually based on whispers of the ancestors. Like when the Sultan of Yogyakarta in 1945 agreed to sign the contract with the Dutch. It's why, after a long period of discussions, the sultans finally agreed to sign, because he believed that his ancestors asked him to do so. That's also happened in 1998 with his son. The last one, Harlem, is important. So power is manifest into this sacred Kris. And in Yogyakarta, for instance, no need to worry about who's become the next sultans, because the sacred Kris of Joko Pituron will show who is suitable to become the sultans. However, from all of those literature, my anticipated arguments is those aristocrats who were successful in their quest for political power in post-authoritarian Indonesia are those who benefited from their role during the revolutionary period of 1945. Aristocrats who answered the revolutionary call had become an important factor during Sukarno era, and especially during the New Order. They accumulate economic power and use it to compete in political position in post-authoritarian Indonesia. So this is my anticipated argument, which I need respond from all of you. My arguments borrow actually from institutionalist and structuralist approach, but expand them with the strong historical emphasis. So I'm not starting like Ph.D. and Hadith we start in 1965. I want to draw it a little bit further, going back to 1945. I borrow from institutionalist approach that I agree that democratization and decentralization open space for aristocrats to compete for power. But the institutionalist approach cannot explain why some aristocrats succeed and others fail. I borrow also from structuralist approach that I agree that the economic resources built up by aristocratic under the New Order helped some of them to compete successfully for power after 1998, but I argue that their position in the New Order itself was predetermined by their political stance in 1945, or in some cases, colonial rule. So I want to draw it a little bit further. I believe that some elements of the culturalist approach are useful, but again, it cannot illuminate why some aristocrats fail and others succeed. All of them have grace, but many of them succeed, and not all of them, and many of them also fail. The overview of the literature has also shown that there is no agreement on one fundamental questions about the revival, which argued by Clinton, by many writers. Can we speak about an aristocratic revival in the post-1998 period? Or were the aristocrats already as powerful under Suharto? My preliminary argument suggests that while there may be more aristocrats competing for power since 1998, those that are successful had already strong roots under the New Order. My research will try to analyze these questions comprehensively. This is the Sultan with the SBY, and he put on the Facebook, so he will approve everyone who asks him to become a friend. My research, I will try to categorize between successful and failure of aristocratic performance based on four things. I have a detail here, but I cannot explain. But it's about historical succeed, whether the aristocracy historically succeed, cultural succeed, economic success, or political success. My research plan. So we are coming to my research plan. This is the map of the Indonesia in early 17th century. So these are the prominent aristocratic houses at that time, including Sulu, who in February tried to attack Malaysia. So this is actually the map is actually not quite much stained. So I plan to have my fieldwork on these 5 areas: in Palembang, and of course in Jogja, in Bali, in Makassar, in South Sulawesi, and in Ternate, in North Maluku. So, I want to see whether this aristocrat is successful in national level, province level, or in the district level. But it should be treated not as a stratification. It's not necessarily, for instance, becoming the mayor in the district might be more powerful rather than become the senate in the national area. So, the pictures might be, aristocratic might be successful at the national level, successful at the district level, and successful also at the province level. Or it might be successful in these two areas, national and province level, but failed at the district level. The pictures might be, it failed at the national level, failed at the province level, but received significant support at the district level. It might also be cases that it failed at the national level, it's successful at the province level, and it's failed at the district level. So the line might be the red line, this might be the green line, and this might be the red line. So to see whether they are successful, I want to know whether it's because of its historic that make them successful, whether it's because of its institutional factors that make them successful, whether because it's structural, or whether it's because of they have grace, maybe, in cultural things. So, my case study is actually based on many considerations, including types of aristocrat, types of administrative arrangements, type of descendants continuity, relation to the Dutch on the late colonial period and in 1945, and the level of political positions. Jogja, for instance, can be considered, to my current understanding, as successful. It's not subdivided or it's not pemekaran. The descendants are continuous. They are clearly shows the non-cooperative with the Dutch, and their target of political position is both at the province and district level and at the national level, even though they are not quite succeed in national level when sultans try lose at the 2004-2009 presidential election. So it's actually, I try to make the combination of those area, whether it is important, so I can make like I said before, I want to make a nationwide research on the politics of aristocracy, so this consideration is very important. The first one, so this is actually the royal flag of the sultanates. The first one is in Bali. We can see that from 1945 to now 2018, the Bupati is always dominated by, with few exception, from Puri Gianyar or Puri Ubud, except from the period of 1965 to 1968 when the Bupati is actually murdered. So actually, aristocracy is part of social, cultural, and religious practices, and aristocratic rivalry become the common features of Balinese politics. So it's dominated the positions of Bupati since the independence. The second one is the Sultanate of Goa. This is their flag, located in South Sulawesi. Aristocracy is influencing South Sulawesi politics. Is strong in former areas of Goa in this short part. So, however, it's lost its economic resources after become the Dutch puppet in the revolutionary period. The descendant of the last king of Goa lost in two pilkadas in 2005 and in 2010. What explains the failure of the Goa aristocracy? The third one is the Sultanate of Ternate and Tidore and in North Maluku, with more emphasis on Ternate Sultanate. Queen Boki lost in 2005 mayoral election, but he won for Senate in 2004 with significant votes. So every province have 4 senators. These 3 votes combined is the Queen's Boki's votes is 1.5 higher, 1.5 times other 3 senators' votes combined. So she received significant support actually. Sultan have been involved in local and national politics in 1970s. He was Golkar until 1997, lost. So Golkar didn't want to support him for the governor, and then he moved to Partai PDK, and then he moved again to Democrat, and he's now sitting as the DPD. So he's at the national level politics. The questions important to be asked is, have voters deliberately removed the royal family from the local political arena and shifted them to the national level because they failed at the local but very successful at the national level? The future of Sultanate is in jeopardy after the Queen Rita Susanti, in the previous picture, 43 years old. This is the 5th wife. Gave birth to the twin royal baby, and both of them were declared as the 49th Sultan of Ternate at 3 months old, replacing their 70 years old father. Of course, rumors spread, and the Sultan's other sons and daughter asked for DNA test, and she's very angry. It's important to know his secret as well at the 78 years old. So another important aspect in North Maluku is that the 2 dominant aristocratic families of North Maluku could not agree the location of the new province capital of North Maluku since 1999, and finally moved it to Sofifi, a village, as a compromise. So Sofifi is the only capital in Indonesia which is located in a village. So this is the Sultanate of Ternate. This Kota Ternate, the Sultanate Ternate is on the right. Here is the Sultanate of Tidore, which all the area is here. So both of them wants that the capital of North Maluku in Ternate and in Tidore, and then the government just pointed Sofifi, a village. It's very important to see. The Sultanate of Yogyakarta in Java. This is the symbol of Keraton Yogyakarta, and this is the Pakualaman. Sultan and Pakualaman are guaranteed to govern Yogyakarta. Their role in 1945-1949 is very important. This is the Sultan's Hamengkubuwono IX that become the representative of Indonesia, receiving the transfer of authority from Loving, from the Netherlands, from the Dutch. The intra-family politics is also important to see, because now Sultan have 21 siblings from his father's 5 wives. And so Yogyakarta, after the bill is given the authority, the province of Yogyakarta received significant specialty budget. This year, they proposed 25% of the budget from all of the province of Yogyakarta, but received like 200 billion rupiah, which they have to spend in these 2 months, because it's just given. So they have to spend these 200 billion rupiah in 2 months. Government proposed, it's important to see in Jogja, it's quite interesting. Government proposed a direct election for governor, but the groundswell of protest led them to collapse the idea. They don't want the elections. They want the sultans automatically become the governor. Why? This is very important to know. The groundswell also produced, to mock the national government, they produced the ID card which symbols Yogyakarta. They also produced the Yogyakarta passport, and even they produced the Yogyakarta money. Sultans now no sons, but 5 daughters. So this one is married today, like 1 hour before. So they are waiting for my presentation actually. So the future of Yogyakarta is also in jeopardy. It's because Java is very close to the symbols. This is the court of Yogyakarta. The sultans is used to sit here, and this is the chair sit by the crown prince. I cannot go further to take these pictures. However, if we see a zoom to the chair, we can see that the chair is very broken. So it's the symbols that up to now the 68 years old Sultan doesn't have an heir. The last one, the Sultan of Palembang in South Sumatra. So these two people, this one is the pensioner of the police officer who wake up and then he said that I received a whisper from our ancestors that I'm the Sultans of Palembang. This one is the wealthy, handsome businessman, and then he also claimed he also claimed to become the Sultan of Palembang 4 years later. He successfully organized the festival Keraton Nusantara in Palembang, one of the most successful, and he formed also Yara Sutra, the organization. There are like 3 organizations about the local aristocracy in Indonesia. He formed one of them, which include the Adat leader to these organizations. What actually the importance of their aristocratic status in post-Suharto Indonesia? It's very important to see. My methodology, I will use the qualitative research to see the related to this research, and the data collection I will use interview. I will interview and documents. I will interview aristocrat, media, politician, economic actors, bureaucrat, intellectual, cultural leader, and many others based on the snowballing technique. I will also try to take a document, important because it's nationwide. So I will go to Jakarta to spend some time to have a national data on the aristocratic performance. In data analysis, all of my interview will be transcript and will be coding, and then after that to find a finding. I will be helpful with this program, the NVivo 9, because it's basically work based on keywords. It's very useful for qualitative research. Because my research is also about the hereditary, I will also need this program, the family tree software. Both of them I already have. Operational. I already have local context in each area. I use my former student and also college. So I already contact them. They will very happy to pick me at the airport. That's the benefit of become the good lecturer. So I will also benefit from the research assistant at UGM. I will transcript and they will help me with the coding. I also benefit from the raw material from previous research in Jogja, Bali, and North Maluku. Of course, they are not about my topics, but the context. So it's very helpful. I already have the context in North Maluku, very complete, what the background and what their numbers. So it's helped me a lot. I plan to have like 4 to 8 weeks in each area. Chapter. I have 2 alternatives, which I need the suggestion for all of you. The first one is thematic based. The second one is case study based. The first 2 chapters is quite the same, from introduction and then the history of the politics of aristocracy in Indonesia up to 1998. And then on the left one is based on the thematic, which I might found in the field, basically based on the approaches, the theoretical approaches. The right one is based on the areas. So Yogyakarta, Bali, South Sulawesi, North Maluku, and South Sumatra. Of course, there's a pros and cons in both of them. This is harder to write. This is easier. But Marco said that this one will bring me to the upper level. I don't know. So I need a suggestion from you. Okay, I think that's basically all of my presentations. And if Obama used the Sultan dress, it will look like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bayu. And now the floor is open for questions, comments, and suggestions for Bayu, how he should proceed. And remember, this is, a proposal presentation rather than an accomplished academic seminar. So focus specifically on the suggestions how he should proceed further.
Thank you. It's very interesting. I have a few things. One is what is the indicators are you using for the failures and success? Are you just measuring based on the political seats that granted for them in the elections, or are you also looking at the non-visible political seats influence? Like here, you mentioned the roles of the Jakarta Sultan in his brother's election, for example. Are you also looking at that? And the second thing, why are you not also looking structuralist approach in a way you're looking at the state and aristocracy relationship? State means the Indonesia state, the government, the central states. If it is back on the Suharto regime, Suharto's period, then it is obvious that all these monarchies, aristocracies were highly subordinated by the central government. Are you trying to look at that as well? Because I think that's also very relevant in terms of structuralist approach. And the third one is just intriguing, something that maybe not input for you, but was just fascinating how all these monarchies and aristocracy use their identities. They have their own passports, whatever. But how is it different with Papua? Sorry, this is out of your research, but it's just curious for me. Thank you.
Well, I will ask the third one first. Passport is actually just mocking, just make the Yogyakarta full of artists. So they try to mock the national government by, we are ready to become independent. Of course, Yogyakarta is not ready. Yogyakarta doesn't have anything, doesn't have a natural resources. It's just to mock the national government. I'm not going to Papua because there is no sultans in Papua. That's the first one, and I might see of course that the identity is very important. That's why I put there one of the things that I would like to see on those aristocracy. In terms of definition of succeed, here I make some details of them to see on the fields. Like, for instance, the political. The successful aristocracies won at the local elections, participates. The first one won in the local elections or at the national elections. The second one, the second category, participate in local direct election and receive at least 20% of the total votes. Has a strong network with the informal leaders, for instance. So I try to, it's not that quite strict because I use the qualitative approach, but I have the category to make sure that I'm not losing my way to see the successful or not about the aristocracy. The relation with the government is, I will see, of course, that's very important. Especially until 1998, what happened with the aristocracy under the new order. My current understanding is that they are used by, actually both Sukarno and Suharto used the similar strategy like the colonial. They use aristocracy to create the stable but controllable system. So that's what my understanding now. But I will, of course, see the relation is very important.
Great.
It was a great presentation by you. I want to ask a couple of things, particularly this key issue you're looking at the historical position of the aristocrats going back, you said, to colonial as well. So you added the colonial, you might go back deeper in history, revolutionary period, the late 40s, then you came forward to the new order period, and then looking at what they're doing in Reformasi. So it's actually quite a big sweep. And I suppose my specific question would be, it's a little bit like Ayu's, how do you judge the so-called success or the entrenchment of those aristocrats during the colonial and the revolutionary period? Are you looking at things like wealth? You're looking at whether they had a reputation for defending local communities against Dutch policies or things like that. It's also, since you've got so much history in there, why are you missing out the 50s and 60s would be the other question. Because it kind of assumes that the new order was remaking or giving a role in the oligarchy these aristocrats, perhaps based on the fact they had credibility due to their role in the revolution. But during the 1950s, there were lots of small parties that, from just my reading of records of that time, had all the initials in front that suggested they were led by aristocrats. We see them listed in Parliament. If that's the case, there's continuity from the colonial period to the revolutionary period and right through the new order. It might change the dynamic of this relationship. So the new order, in fact, is co-opting forces that are already there. It's not necessarily creating them. The nature of the relationship between the regime and these aristocrats and the way in which they're set up for the post-revolutionary period, that could be interesting there. I don't want to add another 2 chapters to your thesis, but it seems to me it might be interesting to see if this is an unbroken line of authority and political exercise of political power that they've had, or whether there have been interregnums, and then the new order period was when some of this revival and entrenchment in the elite took place. The last question I wanted to ask was about dissent and internal disputes, because a lot of the royal families, their credibility is suffered because of the rivalry. Solo would be an obvious example, Chiribon and various others. So I don't know, perhaps that comes under the institutionalisation elements, their ability to resolve succession disputes. But it seems to me that would be one reason where, which would suggest why certain aristocratic families have low reputation, public reputation, and therefore poor ability to become politically successful.
Okay. Thank you very much, Greg. The first one, I'm not looking at the success. I'm not looking whether the aristocracy is successful in pre-1998. So my focus is actually post-authoritarian Indonesia. So I'm not going back whether they are successful at the colonial period or at the 1945. All of these stories I use as foundation or background to maybe determine why they are successful in post-1998. So I will not judge
independently examine.
Yes, independently.
Because even for the revolutionary period, that's because the aristocrats will make their own histories, of course.
Yes, yes.
And I suppose the important thing for you is how local communities see those histories.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second, I agree with you that my anticipated argument is that they actually have the unbroken authority since 1945. That's why here I put on my presentation whether the term revival is actually good in this kind of research, because they are not quite revival, they're there actually. And the third one, I will put there the institutional dispute, because the problems with aristocracy sometimes lie with the brother or the half brother. So they, like the case in Solo, the conflict is between the previous sultan, 35 daughter and son. So to join together, it's the others opposed to them. So of course it's very important to see, maybe even though my research is to see whether they are successful or not, maybe it's important to project. And one of the most important factors to projecting the futures of successful aristocracy is intra-family politics. Yeah, of course, I certainly will make that. Thank you.
Sherwin.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I think when you try to conceptualize the whole aristocratic politics in the whole world, in my sense, I think they're struggling. In a way, they are also trying to adapt with the changing of the context. So, in my sense, they're just becoming like a puppet of the people, how they perceive to the aristocrats. So, in my sense, the education level, the superstitious level of the public, how public perceive to the aristocracy, the power, I think more important than how the aristocrat dance. So my opinion is that you need to check, like Bali for example, they are so much different to the rest of Java and other, the Hindu the majority, how they want the population, their perception to the aristocrats. And it's also the development level is also different between Maluku and other areas. The education level. So probably, have you looked at it? That's one.
Yeah, the perception of the people is quite important, but that's not the only one that I see, because if I only determine the successful or not based on the argument of the people, I will need a survey and I will ask Burhan for it. So it's become Burhan research then. So actually, I want to use. That's why I will use basically on elites research. So see whether. Elites mean here, elite here is not at the political structures but at the methodological level. So elites mean everyone who knows about this idea. So I will not make because it's qualitative research. So the important thing is the depth of the data rather than the width. So the richness of the data is very important. So I will try to find as much elite as possible in terms of information about my research. Of course, I will ask many of I will not ask the people. I will ask the representation of the people.
I think there are many ways without doing survey. You can get information from the secondary data, the education levels.
Okay.
All these things.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your suggestion, Chitri.
Colin.
Yes, I'm wondering about cultural factors. If you look at monarchies and aristocracies around the world, cultural factors are pretty important in explaining, the life of aristocracies and how they go on. Looking at Indonesia, I mean, my experience in most parts of Indonesia is very small, except in Nusa Tenggara Timor. But many times in Medan, I've passed the shut up palace of the Sultan and often wondered what the Sultan's doing. If we say compare North Sumatra with Java, North Sumatra is much more pragmatic. Maybe people there have a different culture. Java, perhaps to me, as an outsider, is rather hierarchical. As I say, my main experience is in Nusa Tenggara Timor, where there are a lot of separate small kingdoms. And I've noticed that people there, most of the aristocracy there has very little influence. It's quite an open culture. People will say what they think, and it's not so hierarchical, say, as Java. But even so, I mean, on certain places, aristocrats do get particular roles which are important, but it's relatively minor. Maybe you'd like to comment more on the cultural aspect. I think it is an important underpinning factor in the longer run.
Yeah, I agree that cultural factors is quite important. But it's, I will see, of course. That's why I present there. Maybe it's cultural successful, but I also put the cultural here as one of the list of the successful of the aristocrat. But to my current understanding, it cannot explain, because all of them are important. If all of them are important, why the aristocracy, like let's say in Surakarta, failed, while their brother in Yogyakarta succeed. So in 1945, both of them have the special province under the Dutch. So both Surakarta and Yogyakarta received the special status. So it's continued as well during the 1945. However, the province status of Surakarta abandoned in 1950s, while in Yogyakarta was strengthened. So in these areas, both of them are culturally very strong, actually, but it's hard. It's only to explain the culturally strong because one of them succeeds and one of them fail. But I believe that cultural aspect is very important. Even though up to today, it's believed that there is the crown in the North Maluku sultans, they have a hair, so the hair is getting long. So there is a special ceremonies to cut the hair, and there is many also mystical things, like I don't know. But when I attended the Sultan's of Yogyakarta wedding 2 years ago, the old man beside me, I took a picture, and I showed him the daughter of the sultans, and she's very happy to see from my camera. I don't know, it is very important to see face to face, even though it's very easy just to Google like that, so it's very easy to see, but the cultural aspect of the Sultan is very important. The one who worked for the Sultan of Yogyakarta, for instance, only received like $1 a month as a salary. $1 a month, but their willingness to spend their time and their energy to the Sultan. So I believe that this might explain the important cultural aspect. I believe that. Yeah. Thank you.
Tamara.
Thanks, Bayu. I had a couple of questions. One is the so what question. Why is this important? And what body of scholarship do you see yourself as contributing to? And beyond Indonesia, beyond the aristocracy in Indonesia, what's the significance of your study of your thesis? And the second question has to do with your methodology. Could you tell us a bit more about your interviews? So just basic things like how many people are you going to talk to? But more importantly, what kind of questions are you going to be asking? And how are you going to match up what you're told in the interviews with what you learn from the archival materials and other documentary sources? And how are you going to weigh up the relative significance of different causes? Because your question is really about what causes success and failure. So I think it's quite important to think how are you going to determine the relative significance of these different kinds of causal factors. So if, for example, I mean, you know, if you're talking to someone about the success of an aristocrat, are you going to ask them why did they elect a particular person, or why do you think this person was elected? Is that what you're going to ask? And if that's the kind of question that you're going to ask, I mean, I can't imagine that someone would respond in terms of the sort of historical factors that you've identified. They're not going to say, oh well, you know, in 1945 this person took this role, and they're much more likely to say, oh, it's because this person paid a bribe, or because he's handsome, or because he's really good to us. And I mean, so how are you going to kind of make a judgment about the responses that you get in interviews?
Okay. The first one about the body of scholarship. My comparative research on aristocracy in other countries, it might be helpful to answer this, because in my opinion it might be related to the unfinished formation of the state in Indonesia. So the integration of the old institutions in Indonesian politics is not yet finished. It's different with those in Thailand, those in Malaysia, in Cambodia, in Brunei. So they already form this kind of political system which adapt the old institution into their politics. However, in Indonesia, this process is still on the way. So that might be the body of scholarship that I want to see. But I don't know now, but maybe that's what I want to see based on my previous research. About the methodology, I plan to ask about like 30 to 50 people in each area. However, this number is not determined only by numbers, but what I want to know is the richness of data, the in-depth of data. That's why the numbers might be good to explain, but roughly it's around that. So I will ask about like 250 people in these 5 areas. In my previous research in Indonesia, I normally ask about 2 to 3 people a day, because I already have, like I show you, I already have the contact. So 2-3 people a day, like, and I still have a weekend. So I think it's a good numbers. About the what I'm gonna ask, of course, is this is an elite research, and I will use semi-structured interview. My answers, my questions is based on the capability of the person I ask. So it's different questions to different people based on their knowledge of this phenomena, and how I will judge that. I will help by the program, the NVivo. So it can categorize. So after, that's why in this research I need the whole transcript, not only the field notes. So I need the whole transcript of all interview. So from this interview, I'm not the seller of NVivo, but it's very helpful because it can clearly depict the keywords, and then all many sources we can just put, and then it can show what is the important aspect of those particular interviews. So it can depict how many words is spoken about 1945, for instance. It's not the only, but I will be helped by software, I think. And also the family tree, yeah, it's helpful as well.
You don't look very satisfied. We move on to Birgit.
Hi, thank you for this interesting outline. You said you want to measure the impact or the success on the national, the provincial, and the district level. I wondered whether you also want to consider lower levels, sub-district level or even village level, either by looking at what impact those sultans or higher level traditional leaders have on this lower levels, or by looking at, traditional leaders who also call themselves kings on the village level, like in Maluku, who also try to link up to that national aristocracy movement. I wonder whether you...
Yeah, it's very interesting questions. However, I divided the district as the lowest one. The province and the national is actually based on the political position. So, the political arena that they can compete. So, and my current understanding is that the aristocracy is never exceed the levels of district except for Yogyakarta. So the lower level, lower than district, might be hard for me because it's not the political competition arena. So even though it's a district, provincial, and national, but all of those three use their administrative area as the base of votes. So the reasons why I choose district is because district, province, and national, because of this political arena. Actually, it might be important to be the lower one, but then it's very hard for me to make a generalization because I have five case studies. So, but if it's interesting, lower than the district, I might put it into consideration.
Do you have concrete some indications that aristocrats are running as Kepala Desa, for instance?
Well, the concrete case is Maluku, where all the kings are on the village level, right? And they try to sort of establish overarching Raja associations that are then also represented in these national forums or aristocracy movement. So they definitely try to link up to this national discourse, although they are only village kings, so to say.
In Maluku, I think it's interesting because I think you have a parallel structure, right? You have the normal Kepala Desas and you have the Rajas.
Well, since Reformasi, not any longer. They are re-empowered, or they are reinstalled, or they are currently in the process of being reinstalled.
Yeah, but my understanding is in Ambon, for instance, you do have an officially elected Kepala Desa, which sometimes may be the Raja, but in other cases it's not. Right? So the Raja may be the head of an area that subordinates 3 or 4 villages. So then that's informal power that's exercised. The people still believe into that power, but nevertheless you still have a formal Kepala Desa elected through the formal procedures.
Yeah, but that has changed since 2004. Villages can choose whether they want to be Negri Adat or traditional villages or administrative villages. If it's administrative villages, then that's exactly how you describe it. But if it's traditional villages, if they are acknowledged traditional villages, then they can apply the heritage principle. They don't have to elect anymore.
That's something you should probably.
Yes, yes. If
okay.
it's important, I put into consideration.
Yep. Oh no, sorry, I overlooked Jackie. Jackie was first, and then you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Bayu, for a wonderful talk. My question follows the same contours as Greg's actually, because I'm a little confused about what is it about 1945 that gives contemporary aristocracies political power. I'm not quite sure what the line of causality is there. And I wanted to go back to your table because you skipped right past it, and I feel like there's a lot of data there that you could unpack. And we should be able to see immediately from that table whether where your position was in 1945 and whether they have contemporary political power, as defined. But that didn't seem to be, in the sort of glance that I had of it, that didn't seem to be the case. And in fact, you have very ambiguous relationships there, where you have, for instance, South Sulawesi, where you have cooperative and non-cooperative. And I just wanted you to, I wasn't sure, this is not my area of research, so I just wanted you to unpack that for me a little bit more. And really, what is the basis of your hypothesis, this hypothesis about 1945 and contemporary political positions?
And is this relation to the Dutch colonial period or revolutionary period?
We're
talking about groups that joined the Dutch states during the revolution, or?
Yeah. This actually, at the first time I tried to, this is the case study where before I choose one or two aristocrats to become my case study in this area. So what is meant by South Sulawesi is actually not the Sultanate of Goa, but larger than the Sultanate of Goa in my proposal. That's why some aristocracies in South Sulawesi insist to become the patriot and against the Dutch during the the early independence, but some of them choose to become the Dutch puppet. In Bali, for instance, is quite the same. Most of them are cooperative. So this one, when I tried, this is the tables that I used to go to choose one or two aristocracies in the areas. So about what the relation to 1940.
So do you see an immediate? So okay, this is the problem here is that you've subsumed a number of different aristocracies within one province. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So we can't see immediately. So successful, failed might be Goa, might be Wajo, what have you.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So why not do this table and per aristocracy, and then could you not immediately see a line of causality between relation to the Dutch, which kind of needs to be specified as a category, which needs to be specified further? I mean, do you already have a sense for that? I mean, is it immediately you see an immediate correlation, just doing it in this visual?
Yeah, because North Maluku not all were cooperative with the Dutch, right?
Yeah.
It's misleading.
Yeah, I plan to have this kind of tables. First of all, like in Yogyakarta, it's like I should explain it in the relation to that. But like in South Sumatra is actually non-cooperative. The Dutch destroyed the palace in 1825. So it's actually not only the relation to the Dutch. I put the footnote here is not only the relation to the Dutch at the 1945, but also the relation to the Dutch before that during the colonial period. So it's not quite the explaining, but I like in South Sumatra, they are sudden revival, maybe we can say that. So I try to use this at that time. This is not the base of my my anticipated argument. This is actually only the base to choosing the case studies.
Okay, but could you not do a table that was very similar? I mean, do a table based trying to immediately establish your line of causality between 1945 and contemporary political power as you defined it earlier. Would that not immediately show you,
Yeah, but I plan to have to ask that in the field actually.
Okay, so it's not really
So
clear.
like
This-
it's
the
not
start
quite
is
clear.
quite
This
Okay.
this is an anticipated argument, not my yeah. So I will ask them. I will test them on the field. The case in Jogja is clearly the one that I know because I'm I'm on the on this research like 5 years ago. It clearly shows that what is make Jogja special is because of their role in 1945.
Okay.
But I would like to test them test this idea at the others area. So I'm not quite know the clear picture actually, which related to this argument. This is my anticipated. So I will test it on the field.
My name is Henry. I'm just still and on this table actually. I'm just I'm not studying aristocracy, but to me the comparison between Yogyakarta and Palembang, for instance, it's quite a distance because Yogyakarta is quite special because it has already got the political recognition compared with others, which is struggling to that level if they may get to. So based on that, do you think that how in terms of equal comparisons, I think to me it's for instance compared to the South Sumatra, still somehow even to get recognition or even people still ask who is this guy, things like that because they're rival and what do you think about it? And
yeah, of course there's always
the first one, sorry. The second one is actually because to be succeeded or not, it's not only from their position, their standing. It's also from the foot of themselves. And the earlier question is actually like if they also practice the foot bias. How do you tackle that? Because political choice in Indonesia is not rational as we expect. It's just somehow money politics is still there.
Well, the second one is definitely Burhan topic. You can ask the Burhan, but I want to ask the first one. There's always the problems with comparatives. No one can compare apple to apple, but like I say in the first part of my presentation, I want to make a nationwide research on aristocracy, and in those purpose, Sumatra is important. So in Sumatra, I want to see what is the prominent aristocracy there. I cannot find any. However, I found this very interesting aristocracy in Palembang who try to get the control over cultural, which I might assume he already have control of the economic. He tried to have established the control in the culture and might be to the politics. So this movement is quite important. So of course it's totally different with Jogja, but because this is different, I would like to see. And in terms of nationwide, I think it's much more better for me to choose South Sumatra rather than to choose aristocracy like in Medan or in Aceh. So see this revival, the sudden revival is interesting. The second one, I don't want to go there a bit further. I just want to know why, because I'm not looking about only on their performance on the politics, which might determined by money politics. I want to see they're successful in terms of economy, in terms of cultural, historical, and also in political. So if we see it's not as easy as that. Whether it's win that we can say successful, whether it's lose, we say it's a fail. Like the case of Bantul, which I presented. The Sultan's brother, which is failed to compete in 2005 elections, is now become the chief sections of keistimewaan, which control 20%, equal to 20% of government budget in Yogyakarta province, and there is a chance that he would become the next sultan because he's sultan's brother. So it's quite interesting where the persons who fail to compete at the district level, and suddenly because of the specialty law become the governor of Yogyakarta. So this kind of this many aspects I want to see, not only their performance in politics to determine the success.
David.
Hey, thanks, Faye. Yeah, my question, sort of on the comparative side, I just wonder how you're connecting your material to literature outside of Indonesia. So you mentioned Thailand and Brunei where there's a national monarchy, but I wonder what lessons can you draw from other case studies where there's a more localized forms of bureaucracy. So I know India comes to mind, where there are a lot of princely states that have played a very sort of complex and contested role through the colonial and post-colonial period. I wonder sort of from other case studies, do you see similar trends or lessons that you might draw? And perhaps following on from Tamara's first question as well, do you think what you might find in Indonesia could also challenge some of the literature on the role of aristocracies in post-colonial states elsewhere?
It's interesting question, David. Like I said before, I think my contribution to the knowledge, to comparison, is that maybe in many other Southeast Asian countries, they already embedded in the political system, and if we can draw the line, maybe it's lays on the history. That's why it's very important why aristocracy in Indonesia cannot integrate into the political system, while those who are in other countries in Southeast Asia can integrate their monarchies. But however, because of the characteristic of the Indonesia that has many islands, so it cannot build up the whole nation's monarchy. That's the difference between Indonesia and other countries. Once we have like nationwide in Majapahit in like 12th centuries, and that's the last, because after the Europe came to Indonesia, they destroy all of the naval military system that owned by the Majapahit Empire at that time. After that, if we there is a research shows that the aristocracy in Indonesia, because they cannot control the sea, they're going to move to the inland, and now Indonesia lost. Basically, we have 17,000 islands, but we lost the cultures of the sea. So that's maybe explain why the aristocracy is only at the smaller level, I think.
Well, his point is, you should be looking out for cases. Now you have compared it to cases
Yes.
where you have formalized, institutionalized monarchies nationwide, and you explain what the difference in Indonesia is. But his point is, how about you look at India, for instance? Do you see similar patterns there? Are Indian aristocrats participating in local elections? Are they succeeding? Are they failing? These kinds of things. So I think it is very important that you also look at comparable cases, not only highlighting the contrasts between Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia, but in fact look at sort of twin brothers of Indonesia around the region where you may have similar phenomena.
Okay.
Or even, look at other cases look at the Sukarno, the magic of the Sukarno name, the success of Megawati, possibly the Sopuan or something like that, where you get the children of very famous political leaders who to some extent inherit their...
But I tried to get him out. There's a big difference between political dynasties and aristocracies. So once we mix that, it becomes a complete...
Not saying
clash.
major, but just something that's worth commenting on, because it's all about the basis of political legitimacy and power, isn't it? And even South Sulawesi, look at the Abdulaziz Khan Muzakkar, who is he elected for any other reason than he was the son of a famous rebel leader. So there can be multiple bases for things that lie outside the particular competency of a candidate, can't there?
Yeah, so that's a broader discussion about sources of legitimacy, but again, we had this debate very early on, how do we deal with the dynasties? But I think it would be blurring all of the boundaries and blurring all of the categories if we brought the dynasties into this as well. And we made that very deliberate decision not to take the dynasties in, because then you have this new debate in Indonesia about people, inheriting their position as bupati to their wives and so on. Is that a political dynasty and so on? This was very particular about aristocracies. So we had Muhajir.
Okay. Since your intention is to have a nationwide case studies, and coming from Kalimantan, I'm quite jealous that you don't really pick up any case studies from Kalimantan. I think there is an interesting case study in Kabupaten Banjar where you can also look at, and actually quite similar to the case in South Sumatra where there is a sudden revival of the Sultanate, and the person coming to the position as Bupati now call themselves new Sultan and try to build this kind of Sultanate, and people are seeing them as someone who are looking at the provincial level position at the governor. So I know 5 case studies gonna be too many.
Yeah, that's you answer yourself. So 5 is already too many. I know Kalimantan is quite interesting. However, the one's different why I choose Kalimantan. Why I choose South Sumatra rather than Kalimantan. So in Kalimantan, the sultans is already become the bupati and then declare as a sultan. So he already hold the political position first and then declare himself as a sultan. While those in South Sumatra is just no one, just a businessman. So I want to see this struggle, why it's very important. And I have to choose, so I'm sorry Muhajir, but I choose Sumatra. But I agree that the case in Kalimantan is important.
Thank you for your interesting and entertaining presentation. Because I'm not an Indonesia expert, I'll just ask one question and make one comment about your research design. What I didn't get was what the broader puzzle is that's driving your research and your research question. Is it like the generally aristocrats lose power in post-authoritarian eras? So I was just wondering, what is driving your research question? You showed what the gap in the field was, but I was wondering what the puzzle sort of behind that is. And in terms of how you structure your chapters thematically or by case studies, I've just been sort of making the same decision myself at the moment as I'm writing up. I think it might depend on if you find that historical factors are most important and that chronology, and therefore that chronology is important. It's often you lose that chronology when you base your chapters on thematic or thematically. So I'm finding that for me chronology is very important for each of my case studies, so it's better to structure my chapters
in case study.
Mm.
Thank you for the suggestion. The first one is the puzzle is because my question actually based on so my research question is based on the data that I get, why those successful and why they are not, why some aristocrats are successful in some areas, why they are failed on the others. That's actually the puzzle, because the institutional arrangement is quite the same, but why this can receive the political and also economic dominance in the area and while the others is not. That's actually the most important puzzle, if I can just try to sum up in just one word. But the second one is thank you for your suggestions. In my opinion, the thematic case study space can also depict the relationship maybe between factors, which might hard to be if I write the thematic one. The thematic one also I have to finish all of those case study in my opinion and then try to write, because I have to have a broader picture of them. While in the case studies, maybe I finish in one and then I can start writing maybe. Yeah, but thank you very much for your suggestions.
More comments? Yes.
I think maybe what you can do is that you make a case studies, and afterward you conceptualize the whole things in the next following chapters. the success stories are based on what kind of facts and what are the commonalities. The failures are what are these. So conceptualizing one chapter probably
Yeah.
make it more
Yeah.
sensible.
Yeah. Thank you.
I also think you don't have to decide either or, right?
Yes,
I mean, you
yes.
can give sort of an overview of your case
Yes.
studies and then sort of
Yeah.
make
Yes,
chapters.
yes, thank you.
Can I make
Absolutely.
one more comment? I know that Marx is trying to kind of narrow it down, but it did occur to me that there's this whole literature about the reproduction of class and how it occurs. And most of that literature is about how the reproduction of lower class status occurs. Your study is really interesting because it's about the reproduction of upper class status. So it might be too broad, but I maybe consider how your study might contribute to that whole body of literature. Especially if you're concerned with success in terms of not just political power and electoral success, but also economic success and cultural success. That might be quite interesting.
Yeah, so get in touch, get some of the literature. I mean, I think it would be good to have this at the beginning to set out a broader theme, then focus on a more narrow subject, and then come back to the implications of that case study for the broader debate at the end again. Again, it's a very difficult field, and again, a lot of people have said, so what about the dynasties? Tony Reid was saying, why do you call them aristocrats, not monarchies, and so on. I think it's important to have that focus and not mix the analytical categories, and certainly political dynasties for me belong in a different analytical field. It would be an equally interesting case study which speaks to the same broader debate, but again, categories I think are very important in this regard. Okay, if there are no further comments, then please join me in thanking Bayu.
Thank you.